Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, From Chaos to Control, Effective Workplace Management. We are excited you could join us. My name is Laura Beth, and I am excited to introduce you to our speakers today. You know, in today's dynamic work environment, the shift in how people work has transformed how organizations utilize their office spaces and resources and engage the people within them. So today, a panel of industry experts will be talking about the essential operational elements every modern workplace needs to support employee success, and we'll tackle the complexities of managing facilities, desks, rooms, and other resources. The session is designed to equip you with practical strategies and innovative tools to streamline your operations and optimize space usage. Well, today we are thrilled to be joined by an expert panel. But before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items. Please note that the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, just click on the Help widget that's located on the bottom left corner of your console. Now, we encourage you to submit questions just at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. You're welcome to submit those at any time as you think of them, and we will try to answer these during the webcast, but you know, if a fuller answer is needed or we just run out of time, it will be answered later via email, so please know that we do capture all of your questions. Okay. To kick it off, I'd like to ask our speakers to give a quick introduction and tell us about their background in technology and facilities. I'll first turn it over to Jenny, who will be moderating the discussion today. So Jenny, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Laura Beth. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very glad to be here to facilitate this conversation today among these brilliant experts in the field. I'm Jenny Mobius, host of the Heroes of Hybrid Work podcast and an SVP at Skedda. Skedda is a leading global workplace management platform serving over 7,000 customers. We are also a key player in shaping the future of the modern workplace experience with interactive floor plans, desk and meeting room booking, visitor management, rich utilization analytics, and integrations with the places you already love to work, Slack, Microsoft 365, and Google Workspace. With that quick intro, I'll kick it off to Kay to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kay Sargent. I am the Director of Thought Leadership for Interiors at HOK, which is a large architectural firm. I am an industry veteran of 40 years. I've been a practicing designer. I work with clients all over the world to help them figure out what's going on, what's happening, how they should be positioning themselves, a variety of topics related to creating great workplaces.
Steve, why don't you go next?
Hi all, and thanks Jenny. So I'm Steve McLaren. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the National Roboteum based in Edinburgh, Scotland. We've only opened our doors in the last 2 years, but we're very much focused on how we get robotics into society. So we work with a lot of startups, we work with a lot of talent in terms of academics, as well as a lot of schools and outreach. So we're a very busy building with lots of different types of people in every day.
Thanks, Steve. How about you, Myra?
Hello, I'm Mayra Portalatin. I'm the Vice President of Facilities at NVE. And I've been working in facilities over 25 years, 20 of those doing consulting, helping out facility managers. And over the last 5 years, I've actually been overseeing the management of multiple facilities, somewhere around 110 million square feet of facilities among about 14 federal agencies in the DC area and across other states in the United States.
Amazing. All right, well, let's get right into it. I'd love to start with a quick discussion about how companies are adapting to their hybrid work environment or return to office, including how leadership teams are communicating with their employees and managing space utilization. Let's begin with Kay.
Yeah, so I think we're actually going to look back on this period, and I think we're going to think that it is an epic failure in leadership and communication. because I don't think that people are really being clear about either the why for coming back in and really doing the communication that they need to with their teams. And I think a lot of people have kind of punted these decisions. I think there's kind of a lack of transparency right now, and I think that is really going to be a challenge. But I also think that the real estate industry is being set up for failure. I think we have a lot of people that are looking at us and they are expecting that we're going to create this amazing space that's going to solve all their problems. And we can create great spaces. But if you're not operating it in a manner, or you don't have the culture, or you haven't retrained people, then space alone cannot address that, because hybrid is really more of an operational model than anything else. And I think there are going to be more companies that are going to get this wrong than they get it right. I also think that people just aren't really thinking about who we are, what do we really do, and creating spaces that are fit for purpose and really tailored to their workforce. So there's some challenges that we're dealing with today.
I love that, Kay. Steve, you've got the boots on the ground at the National Robotarium. Tell us a little bit about, how you're making hybrid work, because I think Kay's right. It's a lot of listening to your employees. It's retraining managers. It's creating the right spaces for neuro-inclusivity. There's a lot of things that we have to be intentional about today. So what are you doing to make this work for you?
Well, we've embedded a culture in our team to look after each other, look after the well-being of each other. The very nature of what we do means we need to interact with people as well as robots, as you can probably imagine. And that kind of drives the need to be, in the same room a lot of the time. So what we had to do is take that into account. So we have a bit of a remote working policy where we tend to do it maybe one day a week, just to allow catch-up time, a bit of downtime, a bit of thinking time. And that seems to be working. And it's very much voluntary. So we don't stipulate hours, but we just empower the people to think about, what it is we're trying to achieve. So it's all about our purpose and our mission.
Awesome. And Myra, what are your thoughts on this? Can you talk a little bit about the workplace experience and how it's important for employee productivity at this stage?
So there's no question that where we work impacts our productivity. And we really saw it during the pandemic when folks were sent, back home to work at their homes. And honestly, you see that there's not a right answer here. Like, some people are very productive at home because there's not a lot of interruptions. And for some people, it is a struggle to remain on task because maybe there is a lot of interruptions when they're at home working. So it's facilities starting to ask their employees, like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, but not only that, but what works for the organization itself. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all type of solution at all. And Kay's right, we're not going to get it right the first time around. It's going to take some iteration of what works, what doesn't work, and occasionally, we might find ourselves in the right sweet spot for our particular organization. But I mean, for us, one of the biggest struggles throughout this hybrid experiment, if you will, has been inconsistent hours. You have people working all sorts of hours because now they're fitting their lives into their work hours. And for some, they're constantly on. And there's very little opportunity for balance and productivity when you're just kind of going back and forth and basically having to get yourself back to where you were at when you maybe break for the day in order to do something that was personal, because now you find yourself like, well, I have all this time now that I can just work whenever I can. And yeah. It really does impact the productivity overall.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. There's not a one size fits all, but the Flex Index found that nearly 70% of U.S. companies now offer some degree of work flexibility. So how can we create the expectations setting that you're talking about, right? The debate's kind of over. One thing that comes to mind is, yes, we're always on, like you said. So how do we set that up for our people? Like, how do we as leaders say, this is what's expected of you, right? And kind of move more towards outcome-based performance versus location-based performance, but really have burnout top of mind, because what you're talking about is burnout, and I think that's a real problem right now. Thank you. So, Kay, what does the workplace experience mean to you?
So I think we need to change the question. And I think that we focus so much on productivity that we're not really realizing that we're knowledge workers in many cases, and we're not producing a widget. And many offices are designed as if people are just sitting in rows and rows of benching, answering emails all day. And so that's what you get. And is that what your company really values? And so the better question is, what is it that you value? Right? Is it being out with your clients and making a sale? Is it innovative and creating? Is it the number of forms you can process in an hour? Is it the amount of knowledge that you can share with other people? And that's a much better metric. And then we should be thinking about the outcomes that we want. And I think to do that, organizations need to understand what their DNA is, what industry they're in, the regional influences, the work styles, the culture, the demographic, and the organizational structure. And all of those things, if you know that, then the answers start becoming self-evident. Because right now, too many clients are worried about what everybody else is doing. It doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. What matters is, what do you want your people to be doing? And then creating an environment that will truly, truly support that. Because a lot of environments today are not set up to support people doing the things that companies actually value them to do. So there's a misalignment. And I think to do that, we need to really create authentic experiences. I think we need to understand that the physical environment should be the embodiment of the culture, the mission, create a sense of pride, get people excited. And we need to understand that in many cases, the number one amenity for many companies is access to people. And access to leaders is really a massive driver. So if the leaders aren't coming in, or if they're coming in but staying in their offices in the back and they're not coming out, it's really hard to tell the younger generation that they need to be coming in for those mentoring opportunities if the people that are supposed to be mentoring them aren't there. So we need to rethink, and we need to be very intentional about how we're creating spaces today.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that comes to mind for me is how important these team level agreements have become. So really listening to specific teams, whether you're IT, HR, marketing, sales, and hearing what every individual team needs versus some kind of top-down mandate that, is for the entire company. And what you said really resonates. CBRE found that 58% go into the office for connection, and only 15% go in for focus work. And that's not the same for everybody across the board, like you were saying, but for the most part, what are some of the design strategies or innovative technologies you use to meet those goals and those differences from team to team?
Yeah, we need to create better gathering spaces that are more fit for purpose, right? Shoving the largest rectangular table you can into a room with a maximum number of chairs and calling it a day does not meet the majority of needs that we want. If you're innovating, you may not even need the table. And we need to make sure that technology is supporting us, not running us. And I think right now it's running us. I will tell you that in the last 5 years, I haven't heard a single person say, gosh, I really wish I had more time on virtual calls and Zoom calls, right? Like something no one has ever said, because we are overwhelmed with that. We are spending 250% more time on those calls. And I think we're getting into really bad habits, because even if I design an amazing space with this great conference room that supports equity and inclusion, a lot of people are sitting at their desk. They don't go into those rooms because they're multitasking. And we've gotten into some bad habits, and we got to break that. And I think the other thing, going back to your statistic about focus work versus gathering, people are doing a lot of heads down individual work. Whether it's a deep concentrated focus, that's debatable. But we're seeing this just abundance of pods and phone rooms in spaces, and this request for spaces like that for quiet, because people have been desensitized to being around other people and to be around noise. And so we have a heightened sensitivity now to sound. And in many spaces that are underpopulated, it's actually too quiet. We can clearly hear somebody across the room, and that's far more disturbing than kind of having this general ambiance or noise. You know, most people can work in a Starbucks, and you've got this buzz and energy that you kind of feed off of, but you can't clearly hear what everybody else is saying. But in an office, if it's super quiet, but you know, you've got 5 people on the same Zoom call and you're hearing this echo and the same thing, it's just odd. So we really have to work on creating the right environments and breaking people of some of these bad habits.
Yeah, definitely. Steve, I'd love to hear what you do at the Robotarium to kind of to tackle these challenges.
Well, we made a very deliberate and conscious sort of mantra when we started that there would be no offices for individuals. That's number one. So taking Kay's point there about making sure that leaders aren't squirreled away in an office somewhere not accessible, we made a conscious decision not to do that. So everybody sits in an open floor plate. We discourage any phone calls or, Zoom calls in that floor plate. If you need to go and have a Zoom meeting, you go to a meeting room, you book it on Skedda, you go to the meeting room. The office environment is where we get the corridor conversations, those sparks of innovation and ideas, just by being in the same space. Yes, there's people working away busily, but somebody will pop up with an idea, and then they'll bounce it off somebody else, and the conversation starts. And that's something we've allowed to sort of grow in the office space, rather than say, no, if you're going to have that deal conversation, go out. Actually, what we're saying is, well, actually, no, the people in the room can join in, and we get a richer conversation that way. So again, back to Kay's point there. But in terms of, we are a very open building as well, so that when we have visitors, it's a similar experience for them. We don't necessarily squirrel away in meeting rooms. We'll sit downstairs. We've got a lovely big sort of atrium lounge area where we can go and have meetings there. And then you've got the whole sort of ambiance around you that helps generate those conversations. So I think, again, back to Kay's points, what we've learned so far, and we're still learning, is those open spaces work better. Those sparked conversations, that human-to-human interaction rather than human-to-robot interaction, seems to work an awful lot better to keep the morale of the team up. And my last point would be towards the culture that Kay's mentioned as well. We have a very clear statement of purpose that we've created together to describe not just about what we're going to do, but how we're going to do it and how we're going to behave, both with our teammates and with our customers.
That's awesome. That's great. So for me, there's just no doubt about that in-person energy. And I do work with marketing and sales quite a bit, so do tend to be more extroverted. But those small 5-minute conversations that we used to have, those drive-by office visits, there's more idea creation in those 5 minutes sometimes than over 30-minute Zooms where we just feel disconnected. So I'm total agreement with you there, Steve. So now that we've covered some how we define workplace experience and some of the challenges that we're having here in the modern workplace, let's move on to discuss the role of facilities and workplace management and how the role is changing as building and spaces become more automated. Facilities used to focus primarily on building and performance, but now the role is broader. And I'm curious if you have a response to that. Let's start with Myra.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, our role as facility managers has significantly changed over the years, right? Before our mandate was really, take care of the building, make sure that we have, water, light, electricity, everything's functioning. But over the years, that has changed. We continue to put on new hats and new hats. It's the space utilization, in some cases, event coordination, security. That all starts getting rolled into what we're expected to do. And now we're also being charged with workplace experience and help figure out how people are interacting with each other, help setting up the spaces in order to making it more collaborative, more, helping them get back to the office and feel like this is a place where they want to be at. Honestly, with this hybrid model that we are seeing now, it's become even more challenging because we're not only being expected to manage the building that we're at, but we're also being asked to help support those out there in their homes. It's the, hey, we need you to take some chairs or desk or peripherals out there so that they have the proper setup in order to have a productive day, participate in collaborative meetings and all that. And it's a lot. Like our boundaries continue to expand, and it's really it's hard to say this, but it almost puts in danger the facilities management role, because it's just so muddled with so many different things that we don't, when people ask, oh, you're a facility manager, what do you do? It's like, oh my God, that is such a loaded question. And I think that there's not really a right answer as to what we do, because it continues to expand. And I think that, each organization is almost making their own definition of what a facility manager truly is.
Yeah, I agree with you. The more facilities managers I speak to, they're being charged with being high touch and being people centric, but also high tech and starting to look into AI. And so the spectrum of knowledge and challenges that they have is very different from what they were before the pandemic. So, Steve, are you seeing a similar shift in the facilities role to being all things, and how are you addressing that?
Absolutely, spot on. We broadened the responsibility roles to become effectively a point person in the building for all our customers, our visitors, the tenant companies that we share the space with, that rent space of us. But the facility manager now, it looks after IT, looks after making sure they're connected, and it's become almost like a customer or a visitor relationship manager in an effect, but with a deep knowledge of the building and all its workings, as well as the digital infrastructure that's used to support it. So absolutely, the role has broadened significantly from, to Myra's point about where it was maybe looking after lighting and heating, etc., much broader, particularly into the usage now as well, actually analysing and optimising the usage of the spaces that are bookable.
Yeah, there's an opportunity too, right here. Right, I feel like with all of these responsibilities comes maybe a larger seat at the table, which I think is right. It's twofold. It's, yes, we have all these responsibilities, but how can I capitalize on this moment right now to get more visibility? And Kay, I hope I didn't interrupt. I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I actually wholeheartedly agree that I think the role of the facility manager is going to change. I mean, there's some facilities that are very complex, like, sporting arenas, et cetera. But I think for a lot of buildings that now have building automation systems, building management systems, more and more is going to be automated. And so it's going to be less about managing the facility and more about managing the community so that you actually need the facility. And I think the other thing that's going to happen, that's going to change a little bit more about what you were talking about, is I think there's going to be a day here where legal is going to get involved and kind of put some clarity around people that are working from home, people that are working in the office, and what the company's responsibility is. Because right now, if you're working from home, and in some countries, if you accidentally fall down your steps or you injure yourself, the company can be held liable because that's where you are working. That is your workplace. But people at the same hand don't want people coming into their office, to their private residences, and being the overlord. So we're going to have some clear separation that if you are doing and working from home, your company might provide you some guidelines, but the onus and the responsibility is on you as an individual, because there are limits about what we can hold companies responsible to. And this is already kind of starting to go off the rails a little bit, and this is where the whole thing will end really quickly if we don't get this under control to some degree and have some definition around that.
Yeah, Myra, would you like to comment on that?
It's you're right, Kay. It's part of the challenge has been that separation and setting up those guidelines to what I mentioned earlier, setting up things and guidelines such as like the work hours and what is appropriate and when are people responding to things and where does our responsibility and when does yours begin? It's especially the idea of like equipping your home office, right, with things to allow you to work from home. Well, we have those things in the office. If you need that, then come to the office. Like the work from home should maybe be something of a need, something smaller. You don't have to have exactly the same setup as you do in the office, because hey, that's why we spend the money in building this facility or purchasing this facility, setting everything up, buying all the things that you need, only to have you now work from home and demanding to have the same access. We have to be able to provide some sort of like limitations and guidelines because organizations are not going to be able to continue to support both at all.
Well, unless you decide, so that's the challenge in the hybrid, right? Like, so if you're primary coming to the office, we take care of you at the office. If you're hybrid and you're going both, it's really hard to set it up in both, situations identically. And we have a lot of companies now that are going through IT updates, and it's like our budget needs to double because we're doing it in 2 locations, not just 1. But if you've identified that you've got a lot of people that can work remotely, and that is their prime spot, then I think the company has some responsibility to say, okay, we're saving on real estate because you're not coming in and your home is your office. We're going to set up some guidelines. We're going to give you access to certain things, but we can't be responsible for some of the things that are happening in an environment that we have no control on, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, we've just gone through this with the banking industry and the SEC, who waived the visits for traders during a portion of COVID when everybody's working home. Now they're going back and saying, we need to inspect this. And the banks are saying, but that means you're going to a bunch of people's individual houses. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So somewhere in the middle, we have to find a happy medium that can address people that can work from home and need to, and people that are in the office and the hybrid workers.
Agreed. Kay, can you talk a little bit more about breaking down the silos?
What a great segue, right? From that conversation, because to do what we just talked about, you have to break down the silos. And the silos being, you have to have HR, you have to have IT, you might have to have security, facilities, you have to have everybody at the table to come together and to really be able to come up with some systems together that are going to make sense. I think when we're designing for IT and technology, we really need to be thinking about what are the right technologies that we need for individuals to really enable them, and then making sure that it aligns with their digital fitness. I think far too often I've gone into a space and seen like a $50,000 piece of technology on the wall that nobody knew how to use. And so it just became a very expensive piece of artwork, right? Because it didn't match their need or their digital fitness. I think we need to get HR really more focus on DEIA initiatives, and we need to be creating spaces that are welcoming for everyone. People that are neurodivergent, we need to people that might be historically marginalized. This whole notion that moms should just work from home, or it's better for moms to work from home, or neurodivergents to work from home. I don't know. The last time I checked, dads are parents too, not just moms. And a lot of people don't want to just have to go work from home. And by the way, working from home for a lot of people is not necessarily better. if you're in your 20s and you've got multiple roommates, or you live in your parents' basement, or you're in your 30s and you've got young kids, coming to the office might be the only place that you can actually focus and actually work.
Oh, yeah.
And just because you're neurodivergent doesn't mean that you're antisocial, right? So we need to be able to create environments that are really more supportive. We need to think about security. I'm really worried we're one good security hack away from companies realizing the instability and the lack of security on many of the networks that people are actually leveraging when they're not in their prime office locations. And we need to make sure that business leaders are really focusing on the needs of the individuals and, again, are creating a compelling enough reason why. Whatever the decision is, why I want you to work from home, why I want you to be in the office. Whatever that why is, we need to be able to clearly articulate that.
Definitely. Steve, what are you seeing on this front? How do you design with the users in mind?
Well, I certainly bear the scars of things that didn't work. So the building is literally 2 years old, as I mentioned, and I'm already taking out quite a bit of IT infrastructure that just didn't meet the needs. So whilst they were planning the building, they didn't have the view, as Kay's pointed out, in terms of HR viewpoints, maybe some IT viewpoints weren't quite in line with modern workplaces, if you like. So there's quite a bit of reconfiguration since we moved in terms of make it usable. And of course, people always use it differently to you expect. I think we've discussed previously the model that says when you build a park, don't lay the paths. I think we've referred to this once before, until you work out where people are going to walk, because they'll naturally walk and choose the path that suits them and works best. So you can apply that to the uses of space, but you can also apply it to the processes that you adopt within an organization. And that's the approach that we've had to take from the day we moved in terms of everything we do. And now that we've been using it for a while, we've realized that particularly the IT and the screens that we use and the spaces weren't meeting what we were using them for. So I think being brave enough to make that change as well is really important. So as leaders, you don't stick to something just because you've paid for it and you bought it and you feel you've got to. Be brave, make the change, work with your people so that you make that much better working environment.
I love that. I love that. I've actually often heard that facilities leaders are somewhat risk averse. So I think that that tip is really important, right? Is to be brave. If something's not working, your employees are not happy with something, to listen to them and to be brave. Myra, do you have any experiences where you had to, where you encountered challenges with maybe reconfiguring a space?
Well, like Steve, there's been a need to reconfigure spaces because all of a sudden, hey, we don't need this much space, or we need a different kind of space. What are we going to do here, right? So we've had to, for example, convert data space into office space, which requires a lot of planning because there is a huge difference between what the requirements are for keeping equipment cool, right, for a data room versus an office space where it's going to be the other way around, where people are going to be complaining it's too cold in here. So you have to kind of plan for that change of the heating and cooling on that space. But not just that, it's planning to make sure that you have the right drawings, that you understand what the needs are going to be so that you can set everything up to account for that change. A lot of times what happens is that they want to save money, and so they forego the planning, they forego the specifications, the drawings, to really have those conversations because they want to save money, and they things like, hey, we're just taking this conference room and split it in two to make two offices. I'm like, no, you can't just build a wall between a conference room and call it a day. You have to be looking at the configuration of the ventilation. You have to look at, do you have enough electrical outlets to support both offices? Maybe they're all in one side. So this office has about like 10 outlets and the other one has maybe one, right? It's making sure that you look at the ventilation. Is the air coming in one office and going out the other. So heating and cooling in those two spaces are never going to be right. You're always going to be getting complaints. The thermostat is in one office, and maybe you have it in the office where somebody's always hot, so they're always cranking it up, and then the other person's always complaining that they're cold because the person on the other side is the one controlling the thermostat. So you have to make sure that you're planning, that you are accounting for the differences on the space and what it is that you're going to need to make that space usable, and that you are not going to be creating further issues for you in the future.
Yep, and even more important now that you want people to come back to the office, to not have those things happening. I was laughing because I used to work in a space where they put up a bunch of glass offices, and I had the vent and I was always freezing. But if I changed it, then everyone else was super hot. So I was laughing because I was just remembering that memory. Great points, Myra. So let's switch gears a bit to talk about the future of the facilities management industry and how you envision the modern workplace. How are innovations and technologies coming down the pike affecting your industry? And we'll start with Kay.
Yeah, I think to go forward, I want to start by going backwards and really kind of looking at where we are. And I think we're kind of at a fundamental point right now where we have a little bit of a challenge. So for the last 40 years, we've kind of tried to design a space that would fit the average person doing the average thing. And I defy anybody to define who is that average person and what is the average task today. So I think we need to stop trying to design to the average, because what we're doing is we're just creating mediocre spaces. I think we need to embrace the concept that it's diverse, it's messy, and that we need to roll up our sleeves and really think about who is it that we're designing for, what kind of spaces do they need, and be much more tailored to be able to address those specific needs. Because right now, we're not necessarily creating authentic experiences for the users. And that's part of the reason why they don't want to come in. They don't really think that they're fit for purpose. And we need to think about that. We also have a lot of challenges ahead of us. We have to deal with an aging infrastructure of buildings. We have climate change. And we are the first generation that knows about climate change and the last generation that can do anything about it. And so this has got to be our biggest priority. We have to go beyond just thinking about sustainability, and we need to think about how are we regenerating and being restorative. We need to think about the diverse users and their sensory needs. And so let's go back to the temperature. We know that men and women feel temperature differently, and that individuals are affected by temperature significantly. I cannot design a space that will be the perfect temperature, but the sun moves, and so should we. I guarantee that in any building, there are hot spots and there are cooler spots. And if we use all those sensors to collect that information and to feed it to the users, and we can move. We are the only thing that is flexible in a space. We want the walls, we want everything adjust to us, but we are the only thing. So if we create different sensory zones within the space, then people can get up and move to the one that best meets their specific needs throughout the day. And then we have a plethora of technology that is coming at us, whether it's robotics, automation, artificial intelligence. All of those things are going to significantly change our industry and the way that we work, and we need to be prepared for all of those.
Agreed. Myra, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that we're seeing it already, but consolidation of space is another big thing that we're moving towards, right? It's truly the future. We have to be looking at spaces differently, start looking at how do we make better use of these spaces. So we're seeing a lot of open buildings, completely vacant. We're going to malls, and how many stores are closed in the malls? And these spaces are now being repurposed. I don't know how many of you have gone to a mall and see like an old Macy's converted into like a pickleball court place, right? Yeah. We have to be doing the same type of things with the office buildings. Kind of go back to what we were doing back in the 1990s of repurposing a lot of historic industrial buildings for mixed use, right? Where maybe the first couple of floors were commercial use, and then the top floors were residential. This then starts bringing people back to the cities because we're creating an environment where we're living and working in the same place. And, to case point, this also helps with the sustainability piece of it, right? We're reusing. We are potentially reducing our carbon footprint if we're not having to get in a car or to go places. We're living and working in the same, maybe like 4-block area, if you will. And that is truly, I feel like, where we're heading, or we need to be heading. Of course, this is going to take a lot of planning because it's not easy to convert an office space into a residential. But we have smart people, we have the technology to start looking at this and make a more efficient use of space. Of course, we're going to have to deal with things like zoning rules and code issues and all that, but that's going to be part of the growing pains into getting us there.
I love that. And I love that analogy to the 90s when we repurposed all those industrial buildings, and they're so beautiful now and people love to work there, right? Steve, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a lot of companies that are looking to design new facilities, building in what they see as the latest technology, and whether that's AI, IoT sensors built into it, robotics and automation, particularly in things like factory floors. And the biggest ask they normally have now is this reconfigurable space. Make it so that if you change what you're going to be doing on a production line or an environment, it's easy to reconfigure the space for a different use and then turn it back again. So that seems to be what's being adopted in the early planning stages now. How can they build that in? I think we've got a long way to go on that. I think we're being a bit short-sighted, as in we're only looking at the technology that's here now. What we should be doing is horizon scanning, making it future ready for 10 years down the line, so that we've got facilities that are not just fit for purpose today, but fit for purpose in 10 years' time. And I think most of the organizations we speak to, we're having to have that conversation with them to say, you need to think about 10 years' time and further out in terms of what you're likely to be doing, what your business is going to be like, how the culture of your workforce will have to adapt to that. So we're starting to get those conversations a bit further into the future, a bit more horizon scanning.
I love that. Are there any other tips any of you could give folks to prepare for the future? I love that future forward look, Steve. It's one of the best things you can do. Myra, any tips for the future?
I think we've all mentioned this at one point or another. It's AI, right? Starting to look at how can you leverage AI for the future? How is this going to influence the work that we do? It's kind of hard to say how it's going to play out at this point. I think we're starting to get a little smarter about it. We are trying to get informed. We are trying to see how can we best use it for ourselves. How is it going to work for us? But at the same time, we have to be careful. One of the biggest issues that I've seen over the last couple of years with all these AI and technologies, it's cybersecurity. It's come right up there where everybody's trying to figure out, well, how do we make our building intelligent? How is this AI going to open us to some vulnerabilities? Because where's the data going to be coming from in order for our buildings to be making this decisions, so for us to efficiently use the AI? Are we going to be able to maybe do a more closed sources AI in order to stay within and therefore be a little bit safer? But that the hybrid environment also opens up some vulnerabilities to that cybersecurity. And to me, another issue with the AI piece is that maybe we might become a little bit over reliant. Some people use it for just about everything, and then they just throw something out there. I'm like, have you looked at this? Make sure that you're also analyzing the data, because where's all this AI pulling all this information from? There's a, just because it's in the internet does not mean it's true, right?
Right.
So that's
Right,
right now we're sourcing everything from. So make sure that you're applying your own experience, the human experience, if you will, before you kind of use the AI information just blindly.
Absolutely. And not to mention those AI hallucinations that we're calling them, when it just makes things up. So I think every human needs an editor. So every robot should have an editor as well. I don't understand why we would blindly trust any human or any robot. Steve, sorry, Kay, I think you had something to say on this topic.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think that one of the things about artificial intelligence, somebody said recently, is that ChatGPT will give you an answer 100% of the time, but it'll probably never be 100% correct, right? So I think we need to take that into consideration. But I also think that, I'm going to go back to Steve's point when he was talking about the future casting. Our clients have been so focused on the dumpster fire that has been COVID and the pandemic and, all of that stuff, that we haven't been really keeping our eye on the horizon. And we are historically bad at looking at the horizon anyway. So all those things that are going to impact us have just gotten that much closer. And for an industry that is designing spaces, buildings that stand an average of 70 years, interior spaces that last an average of 10 years, we really need to be more focused on what is coming so we can be that future ready, right? I think we're seeing that we are historically really good at predicting technology, but where we really break down and don't understand it is the human factor and societal elements. And there are some major societal shifts that are happening right now with a younger generation who knows that they might be working a lot longer, living a lot longer, and might, look, if you're coming out of college today, you're probably going to end your profession in a career that doesn't even exist today. And so they have a lot of added stress and things that we need to think about. And we also know that anytime we go high tech, we go kind of that high touch, right? People want things that they can relate to that are more, we're seeing more authentic spaces, better experiences, more maker movement, the biophilia that really kind of relate to us. And of course, social economic, technology, people factors, all of those things are impacting not only work, but the workforce and ultimately the workplace.
Excellent. Thank you, Kay. Okay, so thank you again for all your thoughts. To wrap up the discussion, I'd love it if you could tell us a bit about your experience using space management software to solve some of the challenges that have been brought up today. What does your organization use it for, and how is it helping? And Steve, I'd love to start with you.
Well, we started off using it for mainly sort of hot desks and meeting rooms. We quickly realized that we could adapt that and use it for sort of other spaces. So we're using Skedda to manage our robots now. So you can actually book a robot out for either a chat with this one here or book a robot out to go and do some testing. So because we have a community of students, we have visiting companies, we've got tenant companies, our own engineering staff, it just makes that a lot easier to manage in terms of when an asset's available or not available. We also use it for event space management as well. So when we host an event, that goes into Skedda as well. And we're probably going to expand into lots of other spaces, workshop spaces as well. And then we're segregating off areas of our main workshop to say, actually, you can book out a small area in the workshop to do a piece of work, knowing that you won't be disturbed. So it works in a number of ways. You can quickly check on the app, basically what's coming up in the day. So I always know before I even get to work if there's any major event on that's going to potentially cause us an issue, because we can see on our app whether it's going to affect an adjacent space, for instance, i.e. is it next door to one? Maybe we've got a school in one half and a business meeting in the other. That's not a great combination when you've got a thin wall. So we would look to deconflict that wherever possible. So we're using it more and more for pretty much every resource that we have within the building.
Thanks, Steve. What pain is it really solving for you all when it comes to workplace experience?
Well, it's preventing clashes and disappointment in terms of, before we had it, it was pretty chaotic No one knew who you would just turn up to a meeting room and go, well, I'm using this one. So we had no real structure in terms of how to book it. The tool we were given didn't work very well. Only certain people could see it. Basically our staff, but any visiting company couldn't. So what we can now do is open it up to visiting companies. People external to our organization can see and can book as well, particularly the tenant companies. So we've moved from pretty chaotic to actually very structured, but structured in a good way, not in an overbearing way. So there's not too many sort of rules and conditions in that we've applied. Everybody's got their own profile. They know what they can book, and that's how they're doing it now.
Thanks for that. Kay, what's your experience with space management software?
Yeah, we have a lot of clients actually that have found success with it. I will say that for some, it goes back to that. It's kind of like training wheels when you adapt a new way of working and you want to make sure that everybody has a comfort zone. And then over time, they might, morph the use of that to something else. So we kind of look at it like the Internet of Things or sensors or utilization 2.0, where you not only are just using that to identify, is there a desk that's open, but is there a spot that is quieter? Is there a location that is louder? Is there a space that is cooler? Is there a place next to my colleague that I want to sit in, right? So it really is now then not just monitoring the people and the occupants in the room, which everybody hates, but it's about empowering them to find the right environment or setting or their colleagues, whatever it is that they need. And so it can actually be a really powerful tool in creating better employee experiences. And these are going to continue to evolve. And Steve, I'm so fascinated by the way that you guys use this tool. And I think that's just another example of how these can expand and evolve as we go forward.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up for audience questions, I'd love it if you all could leave the audience with, one big takeaway. What do you want folks to take away from this conversation of, bringing order to chaos in this modern workplace environment? And Myra, I'll start with you.
I would say that don't be afraid to fail. You have to try. You have to try at least something, right? Don't put so many crutches in front of you that you do nothing. Find something to do, try and come up with a solution, try it out. If it doesn't work, okay, you've learned something, readjust. We're not perfect. The only way you're going to succeed is by trying something. So there's a lot of things out there. Ask questions, use your networks in order to get first accounts of what people are doing, what they're using, and give it a try.
Thank you. Yes, I think with the expansion of the facilities manager role comes with some behavioral changes that need to come along with it in order to succeed. So I think that's a very good tip. Steve.
I think I would say stay curious, always be questioning, always be looking. I'd possibly recommend dedicating time and effort to horizon scanning. What is out there. Actually give the team time to do that and make it a thing, a real dedicated thing that you do as a group. And if you stay curious and do that, then you should see what's coming over the horizon, be future ready, if you like. And challenge, as we've talked about, Myra mentioned and Kay mentioned earlier about AI, absolutely. One of the things we want to teach everybody who comes into contact with robots is challenge it. Challenge what it's telling you. Don't just take its word for it. Don't take ChatGPT's word for it.
100%. Kay.
Okay, I'm getting out my soapbox. And for those that cannot see below my neck, I am standing on my soapbox now. Doing nothing is not an option. And guessing and hoping is not a strategy. We've reinvented our entire process to help our clients take a scientific approach to what they should be doing. I've been a designer for 40 years. I have been waiting for people to take what we do seriously for 40 years. Now, all of a sudden, everybody has an opinion and everybody is an expert, but everybody just says, we're just guessing. There are models for this. This is not new. People have been working in a hybrid manner and or remotely for a long time, and there are lessons to be learned. And if we take that and we apply the science of design, we can do better than guessing. We can help you experiment in a way that you have a higher percentage chance of getting it right because you're designing a space that is tailored more specifically for you. It's like if I walked into a clothing store and I said, I want to buy a wardrobe for somebody. And the very first thing, well, who is it? What do they do? Right? All the questions that you would ask. We're not blind, and we need to take those blinders off and have a deeper understanding of our organizations so that can address it and get it right. Because there are a lot of eyes that are looking at us right now. And yes, we need to experiment, but we need to experiment with things that we know are well suited for us so we have a higher chance of success.
That's great. And thank you again for those thoughts to leave our audience with. I know we're running up against time. I want to get at least one question in from the audience. It's a good segue into multiple data sources to make better decisions, Kay. So question, we're interested in implementing space management software in our office as we're now under a hybrid model and don't have a dedicated desk for every employee. It's a very common challenge today, more people than desks. We need to gather utilization data to figure out the best use of this software in our spaces. Can you help me understand how that data is gathered? I'll go ahead and take the first stab at this one. So hybrid work has to run on data. It should fuel your decisions from setting your policies to deciding whether to downsize or open a new office. And I firmly believe that accessing accurate data from multiple sources is what's really important to maximizing your space utilization. So at Skedda, we have an insights dashboard. You can track utilization with just a couple of clicks. You can see total bookings and users. You can filter by the time of week, space tags and user tags. So for instance, how many times last month were the EV parking spaces used by the operations team? You can filter to that granularity. Or how many times last month were desks with dual monitors used by the IT team? And you can, we've been talking a lot about office design. You can design your spaces by, the way that your users are utilizing it. We recently added Wi-Fi based occupancy tracking as well. It lets you see who has been seen on site through your Wi-Fi network. So no need for a ton of hardware there. And we also added QR code check-ins so folks can check into their space by scanning a printed QR code. So really from your top used spaces for your top users of spaces, multiple data sources really enrich your understanding of how folks are utilizing the space. And it's always really handy to have a single pane of glass view into that. So that's definitely what Skedda can offer, but I'm sure folks on the call have other ideas of how to effectively measure utilization in other ways. Anybody want to chime in before we have to sign off?
Yeah, I'll just say real quickly that there's a lot of different ways that you can measure utilization. The question is, we always ask, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Are you trying to figure out how many people are coming to your building? Okay, entry badge data will tell you that. Are you trying to figure out where they're sitting and what spaces are utilized? Okay. Are you trying to figure out what they're actually doing and whether they're doing it successfully and it's promoting and or their level of satisfaction? So there's a variety of things that you need to think about. What is it that you're trying to solve? And then tailor the system to that. And I'm going to be one of the very few people that will say, everybody says we need more data. We got plenty of data. Most people don't know what to do with all the data that they actually have. So make sure that you're collecting the right data and make sure that it's triangulated. If you get it from a single source, it can be tainted, right? If you get something that says nobody's using the conference or all the conference rooms are booked, okay, but then you go and look and you see, well, but nobody's showing up and or an 8-person conference room is being used by one person. It's not that you don't have enough conference rooms, it's that you have a booking issue or that you have a misuse issue. So triangulate, know what you're trying to solve, and collect the data that is relevant to that.
Well, I would just like to thank our speakers, Kay, Steve, Myra, and Jenny, for a great discussion today. Also, there are some additional resources if you'd like to learn more about Skedda and the services they offer. It's titled Not Another Hybrid Work Debate, so be sure to go there and check that out in our resources section. We appreciate our speakers sharing your insights and expertise with us, and we'd also like to thank our audience for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.